Years ago, Troy and I were contacted by a volunteer who was working for the sheriff's department, and they said that we were needed to come and help move 132 horses from a location in eastern Oregon. And as we set out on this cold December morning in an ice fog, we had no idea what was going to lay in store, and drove and drove and drove through just perilous conditions, hauling a horse trailer. And when we finally arrived at the scene, as the ice fog started to lift, the devastation of what we were facing started to come into view. A couple had acquired some horses and in order to create some sort of a retirement, had allowed these horses to field breed for 5 years. And this couple did not have the means to even have reliable electricity or water. As we started to walk through this carnage and devastation, you could see there were about 30 corrals of mature stallions, and these mature adult horses are turning circles in 5 years of their own manure. Their hooves had grown up like these grotesque slippers into their own kneecaps. And moving past these horses, I could see the main herd out in the distance, and they were all crushing up against a fence where there was an empty water trough, and they were so thirsty. As we were walking out toward this herd, there was a nameable mountain of trash. And what I learned is that they were also allowing working dogs to field breed, and they lived in this mountain of trash. As I'm walking, I'm tripping over something horrific and unmistakable and unspeakable, and I'm tripping over all these bones of all the horses that had died. And the horses would fall in oblivion, and the dogs would come and consume them. It was the most gruesome thing I've ever been involved with. And yet, help has to be had, and we have to press on. These horses had been field breeding. They had never been touched by a human being, and probably few had ever even seen a human being. Moving these horses was going to be one of the most dangerous things we'd ever done. As we walked through this herd to evaluate them, they would just part and move like water, so intent on thirst, driven by their thirst, overwhelmed their fear. And it was like walking through this sea of serrated spines and every example of suffering and carnage you could imagine. At one point, I glanced over the back of all these starving horses, and I looked at my husband, and he's just streaming silent tears, and he just gives me a mute point. And as I looked in the direction of him pointing, the horses pulled apart, and what I saw, you can't even fathom that this was a living skeleton with skin. This horse was so starved that her back looked like a row of daggers with skin stretched over it, 6 inches high. Her sternum came out like the bow of a ship, 5, 6, 7 inches away from her body. 2 different vets estimated that her weight was less than 400 pounds. You could almost put your hands around her haunches. She had wounds on both of her knees, both of her shoulders. Her sternum was bloody and crusty, and she had split her lip from crashing into the ground. I looked at Troy and I said, if she lives through this day, that's the one that we are going to adopt, because that's the one that needs it the most. In an epic event of cooperation, 132 horses were moved in 2 days. 30 of those horses went directly into an intensive care ward to save their lives, and she was one of those. And it took 4 months for her to finally be well enough and strong enough to come home. And it was during that time that the Juvenile Justice Department was bringing out young men from prison who, through good behavior, had earned the right to come to the ranch 1 day a week. I rarely knew what these young men had done to be in prison. They were all 18 and under. What I knew is that because I didn't know their history, to me, they just got to practice becoming the men that they wanted to be. And they were kind and gentle and wonderful guys. And my sense was that for most of them, their greatest crime is that they just didn't have a loving dad to show them the way. And so on this particular day, it was made known to me that a young man was coming who was coming for the first time. And his name was Matt. And all I knew about Matt is that it appeared that his mother loved drugs more than him when she was pregnant with him. And because of her drug use during her pregnancy, Matt was born with a deformed arm and a deformed hand. And this young man had been in and out of the justice system all of his life, fighting to prove that he was not a freak. I can't even imagine his journey. And as we came up, we were introducing each other and all their goofy handshakes and fist bumps and all the things. And what I was aware of is that Matt very much did not want me to see his hand and his arm. And that broke my heart. And it made me think of another one who was fighting and finding their way through a unique journey. And that was this precious little horse that we had rescued. And so I told these young men, hey, we've rescued this horse. It's really bad. She's kind and gentle and sweet. She's just learning about people. I need your help. She heard them, and her head came out from behind the wind shelter wall, and it was like this little fawn looking to see if it was safe. And as she started to take steps out from behind the wind shelter wall, she came into full view, and these young men almost fell to their knees in, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? What? And she came up and just put her head, stopped almost right in the middle, and she reached to the first young man and then pulled her head back and thought about that. And then reached to the next young man and pulled her head back, thinking and thinking. And then she did something really unexpected. She just dropped her chin down and took steps forward and just pressed the flat of her forehead against Matt's chest. And he just stood up straight and he looked at me like, what do I do? What do I do? And I grabbed his wrist and I put it on her. And I said, Matt, just put your hand on her skin and just make little circles. She really likes that. And he never looked at me again. He was just mesmerized that something in this world would choose him. That something in this world would see him how he was and choose him over everyone else. We released all the other boys. I went and got a brush bucket and brought it in and showed him how to groom her and asked him all these questions. And he was so kind and respectful to answer all of my questions. He never looked at me again. It was as if he broke concentration with her, that she would vanish. This one creature in all the world that saw him and chose him. He ended up going back to his jail cell. And about a week and a half later, his counselor called me and she said, Kim, I have to tell you that something has happened to Matt. And my thought was, no, Lord, no, not Matt. He was stepping forward. He was stepping into your love. And she said that on that day when we came, you didn't hear it, but as we were walking up the hill and you were greeting us, he turned to me and he said, doesn't she know who I am? And I said, yeah, she knows. And he took me by the elbow and got down in my face and said, no, doesn't she know that I'm bad? And she said, yeah, she knows. And he was colliding with the love of Jesus Christ that doesn't make sense. And she said that after we came home from the ranch, he started to change and he started to pull back. And she said, Kim, we went into this room and this 200-pound young man just slumped down in this chair and he grabbed his shirt in front of his chest and he just started crying and saying, my heart, something has happened to my heart. I never knew that I could be loved. I never knew that anyone in this world would ever choose me, that anyone in this world would ever believe in me. And now I know that if those people and those horses who live on that hill can love me and believe in me, I think it's time for me to start believing in myself. A life can change in a moment. A life can change in a moment, and you never know when that moment is going to be. It is not up to you and I to know how Jesus Christ is going to use our love. It is only up to us to give it to as many people as he crosses our path with. Hope is like light in the darkness. Sometimes a very small amount that seems insignificant and inconsequential to you and I. For someone who is in a very dark place, that tiny amount of hope can be enough to light the way toward freedom and redemption. Perhaps you are the one who is in a very dark place, suffering, unseen, moving along in a hopeless season of your life. What you need to know and what is true is that Jesus Christ sees you and that he loves you so much, and that it is he who is reaching for you now to rescue you. Will you choose him today? May this be the moment that you experience that transformation of your heart.